Magic the Gathering is one of those games that is just littered with terminology. Some of the most important are those we use to describe our decks. Whether you're a fresh or seasoned player, I'm sure you've heard things like Esper control, Boros aggro, or Abzan midrange. But with the game being as old as it is, there are many players who don't even know where these shorthand names came from. I've been playing for nearly 7 years now, and all of these names predate my own story with this game. So in this video, I will take you on a journey through Magic's history to uncover the names and origins of each color combination, and let you in on all the interesting facts I found along the way. Now, the best place to start would be at the beginning, with the birth of multicolored cards. The concept that a given card could be made up of more than one source of mana wouldn't be a thing until Magic's third set, Legends, and was the brainchild of Steve Conard and Robin Herbert, who actually designed much of the set before the game was even released, as they were so enamored by Richard Garfield's initial design. These multicolored cards would come in both 2 and 3 color, and you might be in the right to assume that this is where the story would end. Surely all the names for each color combination would be defined in the first set that introduced them. But this was still early in Magic's turbulent history, and as such, naming combinations of colors wasn't really a thing. The reason for this was simple really, as there was no consistent name shared among any of the combinations. As for any given color combination introduced in Legends, there were multiple characters assigned to them, so nothing really stuck. Multicolored sets would pop up from time to time, with the Invasion block being the most notable. In this block, the idea was that the 5 colors would band together to stand against Yawgmoth's invasion, resulting in colors coming together to form multicolored cards. There still was no unified vision, but rather an experiment on how to design around multicolored cards. In the end, the naming conventions for color combinations wouldn't really begin until the release of Ravnica, Magic's cornerstone plane. Ravnica holds a special place in my heart because it was the first set to really put the color pie first in its design of the plane and its resulting cards, giving us the sort of faction or guild model that is used heavily to this day, by providing us with 10 distinct factions in the guilds that make up this plane, all of which help define the philosophies of each color pair, and set in stone this idea of providing naming conventions for their given combination. Those guilds, and subsequently the color pair names we would use because of them, are Selesnya, Orzhov, Boros, Azorius, Dimir, Rakdos, Golgari, Izzet, Simic, and Gruul. Considering that this initial block itself came out in 2005, and that Magic the Gathering is an ever-evolving game, there is a good argument to be made that the names itself should evolve with it as well. For instance, the enemy color pairs were most recently redefined in the set Strixhaven, with its 5 schools, those being Silverquill, Lorehold, Prismari, Witherbloom, and Quandrix. And while you can be that contrarian at your LGS, the truth is most people don't really use these names. Why is that? Well, I think it's really as simple as Ravnica just being the first. Don't get me wrong, I do really like what Strixhaven did for enemy pairs, but the idea that we should rework our definitions around every color pie first set, it really only leads to confusion. So if Ravnica was the first set to provide names and definitions for pairs, what was the first instance of 3 color combination names? 2 years after the end of the first Ravnica block, we would be given another great color pie first set in the set Shards of Alara from 2008. What's interesting is that not only would this block give us names for 5 of the 3 color combinations, it would also provide a naming convention for this grouping of combinations as well. Shards represent a cluster of 3 colors, all of which have one of Magic's 5 colors at its center, and its 2 allies to the left and right of it. So for instance, the Esper shard has blue at its center and is made up of blue's 2 allies, those being white and black. As such, there are a total of 5 shards: Bant, Jund, Grixis, Esper, and Naya. Each of these names would come from Alara's unique composition, in that it was a plane made up of 5 mini-planes, as it was once a single world that had been shattered in the Sundering. Each of these 5 mini-planes would consist of only 3 colors of mana, unlike every other world in the multiverse, which consists of all 5 colors. Once again, this block would not only put in a lot of work in defining the names, but the core themes and philosophies of these combinations as well, something which I believe is always a feature of a color pie first set. Now, with shards defined and given proper names, there was still 5 other potential combinations of 3 colors missing, but we would have to wait until 2014 to get those. In the first set of the Tarkir block, Khans of Tarkir, we would be introduced to a plane that formed in a timeline where the dragons that had once ruled were no more, and the rest of the races formed 5 distinct factions, each based around 3 colors coming together. These 5 factions would provide us with the names for the wedge combinations. But why do we even call this type of combination wedges in the first place? Shouldn't it be like Alara and its shards? Conversely, calling this form of combinations Khans or clans? Well, not in this case. Instead, it seems like players gravitated more to how the shape of the combinations formed on the color pie, creating a sort of wedge or triangle shape when you draw a line across each part. This wedge shape is formed because each of these combinations are built around one of the 5 colors and its 2 enemies, those 2 colors that sit across from it on the color pie. The 5 resulting wedges are Abzan, Temur, Jeskai, Mardu, and Sultai. Now, similarly to how we saw a redefinition in Strixhaven and Pairs, these wedges would also be reimagined in the later set Ikoria. So if you want to switch things around, you could always use the names of each of the 5 triomes from that set, which in itself could be another name for wedges. Those combination names would be Indatha, Ketria, Zagoth, Rogran, and Savai. Now, with all the 2 and 3 color combinations covered, it's time we talk about the 4 color combinations. For that, we'll actually have to take a step back in time and return to the original Ravnica block. This is where things start to get a bit more obscure, and every rule that I mentioned about conventions gets kind of thrown out the window, where we'd be getting pretty deep into an iceberg if I formulated in that way, with a naming convention that even more seasoned players rarely bust out, as the names for the 4 color combinations would not come from any faction, but rather from a cycle of Nephilim creatures, which coincidentally is the name used to describe these 4 color combinations. Those combination names are Glint, Dune, Ink, Witch, and Yor. Truthfully, of all the combinations I've spoken about, these are the names that many players, at least newer ones, may not even have heard of. This cycle of cards all come from the plane of Ravnica, and we're the first instance of Magic using 4 color combination cards in this game, which is even more odd because 5 color was introduced in the game as early as 1998 with Sliver Queen in Stronghold. What's more is that the 4 color combination is the least used set of color combinations in this game, also falling behind 5 color in this regard. Unlike with the other combinations I've mentioned, we have not gotten any factions with these sets of colors that can provide us with a better naming convention, and I doubt we ever will, as 4 color is just the sort of combination that only makes its way into sets randomly, like with Atraxia or Aragorn. So I have a feeling the Nephilim will forever be the names of the 4 color combinations long into the future of this game. This leaves us with one final combination of colors, and that is, well, the whole color pie, or 5 color, which runs the gambit, with names like Rainbow, Domain, 5 color, or most commonly Wooburg, spelled W-U-B-R-G. It's an odd way to go about it, but I doubt it could be anything less than rattling off the first letter of each color, because you cannot form a pattern or convention when there is no cycle to base it off of. Thus the name Wooburg. But you may be asking yourself, where the hell does the U come from? Well, early on, R&D used single letters for shorthand to describe the many card types and card parts in the game, and this put black and blue at odds. So one of them had to change because they could not both use B. L was already taken by land, so neither could fall back to that. And A was used by artifacts, so that meant B, L, and A had conflicts with one another. Considering black would have to use its 4th letter in K, Since C already meant creatures, then it was up to blue to change, dropping the B and the L and leaving us with U. It's a funny little quirk, but when you lay it out like that, it does make a sort of sense in a matter-of-fact way, which in many ways reflects this combination's naming convention. There is no history or deep story, it's just every color laid out in the order we see it on the back of a magic card. The shorthand we use to describe color combinations is an interesting thing, as each name we use comes with it a bit of history. Even though no name is set in stone, players have nonetheless gravitated to the first factions who helped define those combinations, and they are a great way of describing something at a glance. But understandably, they can detract from the essence of a color combination, because we then assume that the originator of that combination is the true face of it. Think of Boros versus Lorehold. Both describe the same set of colors, and yet they come with their own assumptions as far as philosophy and themes. So in that way, combination names can be a handy and quick way to describe your deck, but detrimental to deeper discussions. But hey, that's a conversation for another day. Well, I hope you enjoyed this look into the combination names of Magic the Gathering. Let me know in the comments if you are one of those contrarians who use a lesser known combination name, and what that name is. The more obscure, the better. With that, friends, I will catch you in the multiverse. Bye.